webinar sponsored by DAISHA, the Drug and Alcohol Testing Industry Association, and hosted by the Current Consulting Group. It is to provide education, resources, and advocacy to those involved in and interested in drug and alcohol testing. Visit DAISHA.org to learn more about how you can benefit from the many services provided by DAISHA. The consulting group is a tenured team of industry experts with complementary disciplines spanning the field of employee screening. It partners with its clients to increase their access to quality information, expand their knowledge of products and services, and improve their performance, allowing them to optimize their profitability and their clients' return on investment. Today's is entitled 2015 Trends in Drug Testing, 17th Annual Industry Survey, and will be presented by Bill Current. Bill Current is the president and founding partner of the Current Consulting Group and the publisher of the online guide to state drug testing laws at statedrugtestinglaws.com. He's the author of 10 books on substance abuse-related issues, including the popular title, Why Drug Testing? He is a leading provider of drug test policy right services, working with companies to help them optimize their drug testing ROI. Bill is the former executive director of the American Council for Drug Education and vice president of consulting for employee information services. We'll now hear from Bill Current.
Jessica, and welcome to everyone who is on today's webinar. This is our final webinar of the year 2015. I think we're at about 62 or 63 webinars that we've done this year through webinar hosting business. We're very thankful to acknowledge DAISHA, the Drug and Alcohol Testing Industry Association, as the sponsor of today's webinar presentation. We're very grateful for association with DAISHA, presented at the DAISHA conference earlier this year, and we look forward to presenting again in 2016. And we've done a number of webinars with DAISHA this year and are grateful to have them sponsoring today's presentation. As Jeff mentioned, we're going to talk about the results of our 2015 Drug Testing Industry Survey. We have been conducting this survey every year since 1999, basically. We did the very first Drug Testing Industry Survey in 1999 and have been doing it every year since then. And in fact, want to also take a moment to acknowledge some of the core sponsors who made this year's Drug Testing Industry Survey possible. It takes a lot of work, it takes a lot of time. It's a project that has grown from year to year and just keeps getting bigger and bigger. And it would not be possible without the generous support of the corporate sponsors that you see on the screen here today: Quest Diagnostics, Alere Toxicology, OraSure Technologies, Livestock Compliance Information Systems, or you might know them as CIS, PAML, Premier Biotech, and AWSI. Do an international survey. 2015 was our third annual international drug testing survey. And some of the companies that you see on the screen were sponsors of that as well. We are scheduled to do our 18th annual Drug Testing Industry Survey again in 2016. We look forward to the support of companies like those on the screen and anybody on today's call who would like to participate as a corporate sponsor. There's some little perks that come with it, and if you're interested, let us know. Also, just before I launch into the results of the survey, let me just mention as well that one of our services at the consulting group is something called statedrugtestinglaws.com. It's an extensive, comprehensive online base of state laws that affect drug testing. So it's not just drug testing laws at the state level, like you might find, say, in Nebraska, Oklahoma. Oklahoma would be a good example. But it includes workers' comp laws, unemployment comp laws, especially marijuana laws, and you find all of that information with the subscription to statedrugtestinglaws.com. I mention it in the course of this webinar because it's a service that has been endorsed by DAISHA. DAISHA members get special pricing, a few perks that come along with that. So if you're a DAISHA member and you're interested in getting that type of information, let us know, and we'll send you some information about statedrugtestinglaws.com and make sure that you get the special DAISHA member rate for that. Now, the teen survey of the drug testing industry is a product or service of the Current Consulting Group. It involves email-based portion, and then also personal interviews that we do by telephone with a number of people in the industry. And what we're doing, it's a different survey than perhaps what you might see from some of the political ones that you're seeing on TV these days. This is talking to people in the industry. Anybody really in the industry who'd like to participate can participate. It's not a scientific survey in that regard, like you might see with a Gallup survey. But we're talking to people in the industry, and we're recording what they tell us, some of which can be quantified in percentages and total numbers and things of that nature. But a lot of it is really sort of verbatim responses to the questions that we ask. We capture those. One of our agreements with everyone who participates is we won't attach your name or your company name to your quote, but I'll tell you that all of the information in here comes from people in the industry, and it gives a very unique perspective on what's going on in drug testing, alcohol testing, even background screening, because we ask questions related to that as well. So as I take you through the survey today, some of it will be numbers, a lot of it will be, especially at the end, will be verbatim comments from people who participated in the survey. We're going to talk about first the state of the drug testing industry. I'll just use that term, but of course we're talking about companies that do background screens and physicals and things of that nature as well. The specific drug testing trends, a popular part of the survey every year is the name recognition results. That's where we ask you to name top 3 brand names in different categories: laboratory, oral fluid testing, alcohol testing, etc. Then we add those up and we name the top names or recognized brand names. Let's say this is not somebody hopefully depending on maybe quality or the product they use, but what are the most recognized brand names? And then we add up and we'll share that information with you in quite a number of different categories. And then share some verbatim responses on concerns that people in the industry expressed about where we are now, where we're headed. And then our bonus question this year is, what will marijuana have on the drug testing industry? I think you'll find some of the results from people who participated in the 2015 survey to be quite interesting. Okay, so let's look at the people who participated. That'll give you an idea of sort of why the numbers that you're going to see when you understand who participated in the survey. So asked, and people could obviously check more than one box, 68.4% of survey respondents said that they consider themselves third-party administrators. These are companies that manage all types of aspects of a drug testing program, a background screening program, et cetera, et cetera. 50% identified themselves as collection sites or a network or a collector. 43% alcohol test providers, 30% training, 30% MROs, 27% background check providers, 20% employment screening providers, the more generic term, 9% distributors, 19% policy writers, 30.6% laboratories, 8% manufacturers of drug testing products like an Osher, for example, 8% technology companies, sort of the broader other category, and 6.8% sales and marketing consulting would be companies like the Current Consulting Group. So the majority of our participants, as you can see, would consider themselves third-party administrators. And then very interestingly, what percentage of all drug tests that a company sells and conducts for your clients are DOT? This is an important question. I'll explain here in a second, but look at the results. Almost 1% of our drug tests are DOT, 0%. Nobody said that. More than 5%, 5.5%, about 75%, 8.3%. And then you're getting into the higher bars here, about 50%, 15% of people said about 50% of their business is DOT. 2.8% said about 40%, but 37.5%, the biggest category, said about 25% of their business is DOT, their drug testing business. And interestingly, we do not work with DOT clients, 4.1%, and 12.5% said they weren't really sure. Maybe they did the day they took the survey, or they don't keep track of those kinds of things. But it's interesting because when I did the first survey in 1999, all this was just flipped around the opposite. 75% of all drug tests are, let me put it this way, 75% would have been DOT, according to the people who participated in the survey. So in the last 17, 18 years, that is down to where now it's about 25%. The majority, 25% of their business is DOT. This is important because you've got to know who you're selling to, right? So maybe doing business in a state has a testing law that says one thing, which is contrary to what we find perhaps in 49 CFR Part 40, but if the vast majority of your client base are not DOT mandated, then you have to concern yourself necessarily with doing exactly what's in 49 CFR Part 40. You need to concern yourself with what your state law requires or with what various laws in your state require. Unemployment comp laws or workers' comp laws that have a direct impact on how drug testing is conducted. Sometimes not the state drug testing law, but it's that workers' comp or unemployment comp law that has more detail in it regarding the procedural requirements for drug testing if you're going to move to deny benefits in a workers' comp case or in an unemployment comp case. That's so the majority of the drug tests that we sell in the industry today are not to companies that are complying with the DOT regulations. They're what we would call the non-mandated market for drug testing. What % alcohol tests are DOT? You look to the left there, less than 25% is DOT. That's 29.7% of our respondents in that category. Between 25 and 50% is DOT, 18.9%. Between 50 and 75%, 18 point again, and then over 75%, 16.2%. Now, if you add up the red bar, the green bar, and the purple bar, you get a pretty healthy response there of about almost 50%. That a lot of alcohol testing that we sell, that our clients conduct, is DOT mandated, at least, a percentage of it, which is that in the non-mandated marketplace for drug testing, there's opportunities to sell more alcohol testing. Out of the DOT mandate, outside of those DOT regulations, in mandated situations, alcohol testing, you do have to be concerned about the Americans with Disabilities Act restrictions that have been applied to place alcohol testing. But under DOT, of course, those restrictions don't apply. You're required to do random alcohol testing under the DOT regulations, where outside of the DOT regulations in a mandated arena, there would be very severe restrictions on alcohol testing. There would be other forms of alcohol testing that could be conducted, especially in safety-sensitive workplaces. And so this is an important part about where the market is for alcohol testing, but it also creates, I think, an image of where some opportunities exist as well. Okay. You now have a feel for who participated in the survey. Now let's talk about the state of the industry. We're going to the state of generally, drug testing sales, profitability, background checks, and then we added international testing to the survey this year. So when asked to comment on the state of the industry, you see the options that the survey participants had at the bottom of the screen. So when the state of the industry, 50%, the tall blue bar to the left of the screen, said strong, healthy, vibrant, and moving in the right direction. Only 0.4%, the red bar next to it, said it was weak, troubled, sluggish, and moving in the wrong direction. 10% felt it was stagnant, level, about the same, and 20% said it was strong, but they were unsure of its future. The blue bar to the right of the purple, 0.5%, those were people who were weak but optimistic about the future. So the majority of people feel that the industry is in a strong, healthy position, or at least a strong position, even if they're unsure about the future of the industry. That's important to know, of course, that this is just a general barometer, sort of the health of the industry, and it's one in which, if you go back to our survey results from, say, 2009, would have been not very optimistic. And so these bars would have been reconfigured with a lot of people feeling that the industry was weak, troubled, sluggish, and moving in the wrong direction. We've come a long way since the 2008-2009 recession, where unemployment was higher, therefore employment testing was where having an impact on our industry. Of course, that it's been 4 years now that we've seen more optimistic report from this question in the survey. Drug testing sales in particular up in 2015. The blue bar left, 63.3% of survey participants said they were up in 2015 versus 2014. I don't have the exact number in front of me, but in 2014, again, it was a fairly significant percentage that felt that drug testing sales were up in 2014 compared to 2013. So for the last 2 or 3 years, we've seen a significant upward trend in drug testing sales. 16.9%, the red bar next to the blue bar, sales were about the same in 2015. So if you add those together, you're looking at a pretty healthy percentage of people in the industry who at least felt like they were holding their ground with drug testing sales, or the sales were up. Only 12.6%, the green bar there in the middle of the screen, said sales were down compared to 2014, and 5.6%, the purple bar, said that sales are up beyond what we had expected. So a pretty significant, healthy percentage of, say, participants said testing sales were at least the same or up, and 5.6% said sales were up beyond what they had expected. Only 4.2%, the light blue bar, said sales were down beyond what they had expected. Now, the orange bar, we believe sales will be stronger in the second half of 2015, 4.2%. It doesn't reflect the second half of the year as much as it does the first half of the year, because we do move the survey between June, July, and a little bit more in August. But that dark red bar off to the right of the screen, 14% said 2015 is their best year ever. 14%. That's significant when you think about it. They're probably somewhere in the neighborhood, and we estimate, we tried to do the math on this, we estimate that there are about 5,000 TP drug testing resellers, distributors, etc. They may be in the form of an LO, a collection site business, an occupational health network, etc., or traditional TPA. We didn't have 5,000 people participate in the survey, but this is interesting. 14% test that 2015 is their best ever. Now, everything's relative, of course. We don't know what they're comparing that against in terms of actual dollars or actual volume of drug testing. But again, one more optimistic key indicator of the healthy industry in 2015 compared to previous years. Now, profitability, because it really does come back down to the bottom line, right? 4.8% indicating that their profits are up in 2015, and 30% saying that their profits were the same in 2015 compared to 2014. So about 72% plus indicating that profitability is at least the same, if not up, in 2015. 13.5%, although that's still not an acceptable number, but 13.5% lower than the 72% to the left of the green column or bar, said profits were down in 2015. And 2.7% of our survey respondents say or indicated that they rely on other services besides drug testing to drive profit. Okay. Some real responses actually behind some of those numbers as well. Background checks. Now, keep in mind, we're surveying members of DAISHA, members of APA, companies primarily, first and foremost, drug testing providers. Of course, our background screen check, members who are of DAISHA and SAPA who participated in the survey as well. But the survey mostly reflects, as we saw on that first slide, the vast majority of them are TPAs or collectors. So you don't see the really high numbers here for background checks as you do for drug testing for 3 reasons. Background check sales up in 2015, according to 21.4% of our survey participants, and sales are the same in 2015 with the response from 11.4%. So over 32% indicating that sales of background checks were at least the same, if not up, in 2015 compared to the previous year. Only 5.7% said that background sales were down in 2015, and 8% said they anticipate an increase in sales of checks in the latter part of 2015. Probably the most interesting stat on this page is the tall light blue bar to the right of the graph. 55.7% of our survey respondents said they do not sell background checks. And in age, I really seriously question what that would be. For one, you always want to try to diversify your different revenue streams, and so background checks is a natural add-on to drug testing. And so you can outsource it to any number of capable background check providers that are probably members of NAPBS. But also another way to drive revenue through your business and improve your bottom line overall. So I was surprised. We hadn't asked this question in the past in quite this way. So I was surprised that over half of the survey respondents said they don't sell background screens at all. And only 5.7%, or I should say 5.7%, said they do proactively sell background screens. So yeah, those two together, over 60% either don't sell them background checks or they really aggressively try to sell background checks. So I think many companies in the drug testing industry probably missing out a little bit there. If you go to an NAPBS conference, which I spoke at this past in Austin, Texas, you would find that a lot of background screen companies are becoming more aggressively involved in selling drug testing. So a little competition coming your way to the drug testing industry. Vocational drug testing. As I mentioned, we conduct an international drug testing survey. We've done that every year for the last 3 years and presented the results of the international survey at the IFDAC conference in San Diego earlier this year. This slide was from that survey. This slide was part of the U.S. drug testing industry survey that we conducted. I point out, because we do the international survey, we're aggressively going out and contacting drug testing providers all across the world. And so whereas some members of DESHRA SAPA who are internationally active might participate in our international survey, a lot of them are companies that are based in Europe, Australia, Asia, South America, etc., whereas this would be mostly U.S.-based companies. So that's an important explanation, excuse me, because it's why the bars are as low as they are. 0.8%, for example, the blue bar, we are very active in providing our services outside of the U.S. The green bar, 52%, say do very little business outside of the United States. However, 19%, the bar, said that they anticipate becoming more active in providing their services outside of the U.S. This is important because right now, if you look at the total market for drug testing, into our research, and there could be some flaws in our methodology, but I think pretty accurate. We here at the Current Consulting Group that in 2015, well, let me speak to 2014 because the year's not over quite yet. In 2014, there were about 50 million drug tests conducted in the United States, in all the different markets: workplace, treatment, criminal justice, law enforcement, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, schools, sports, et cetera. Tests that we could estimate. That the rest of the world represents about 50 million drug tests. So at least half of all drug tests worldwide take place in the United States. However, that other half creates or represents a significant opportunity for U.S.-based companies where the drug testing industry is more mature, much more refined than it is in most other countries. Not all countries. Australia, very developed. Certain parts of Europe, especially around the North Sea countries, the UK, Norway, etc., progressing. Okay, some parts, not very many parts, but some parts of America, like Brazil, for example, not maybe as developed or mature as the industry is here in the United States. But the point here is that given the expertise that exists among many providers of drug testing services here in the U.S., the rest of the world represents quite an opportunity. So because there's still a significant percentage of U.S. providers who really don't do anything outside of the United States, and many of them, many providers here in the U.S., if there are 5,000 TPAs as we estimate, most of those companies are very small, local, regional providers, would not be competitive at the international game. Others could be. So I point out that's what we see here. Of course, our national survey results are based on international providers for the most part, even those that like a Quest, Lear, Orcher, other companies that are very active internationally, Psychomedics, Omega, etc., AWI and DISA, some of the things that are very well known for doing this outside the U.S. Okay, on the halfway mark in today's webinar presentation. I'll make sure I pace myself so that I can spend ample time in the recognition section of the survey, which when I make the presentation, when I do that live, that's usually one of the most, I think, interesting and exciting parts of the survey. So I'll make sure I leave plenty of time for that. If you have any questions, though, use the Q&A section on the screen in front of you and let us know. We'll if there's information that you wondered about, we'll dig through the data that we have and see if we've got there, and then we'll send you an email and let you know. Now, alcohol testing, we expanded the number of questions regarding alcohol testing in the 2015 survey, so we have a lot more data on alcohol testing than normal. And alcohol testing sales in 2015 were up, according to about a third. You see the blue bar to the left, 33.3%, 41.6% saying that they're about the same. But this is pretty healthy. Nearly 3/4 of our survey respondents said that alcohol testing sales are at least the same, if not up, in 2015. Only 5% indicated sales of alcohol tests were down in 2014. 4.1%, the purple bar in the middle of the screen, anticipate an increase of alcohol testing sales in the second half of the year. Only 1.3% said they do not proactively sell alcohol tests. Most companies do provide that testing, make that test available. And 4.1% they'd like to sell more alcohol tests. So a company that's in the alcohol testing industry, a alcohol test manufacturer, a breath testing provider, or maybe a saliva test provider. There's at least a number of companies out there that wish they were doing more in this area, so it creates an opportunity there. Only 11%, that dark blue bar on the right, said that the question was not applicable to them. But again, that's interesting because I think alcohol tests represent an opportunity for traditional drug testing providers that's active in the non-mandated market. Now, what method alcohol test do you sell? Of course, you see that big, giant slice of the pie there, 69.7%, indicating breath alcohol testing. We could probably guess that ahead of time. 27.7%, however, said saliva testing, that red slice of the pie there at the bottom, and 15.4% said blood alcohol testing, which I thought was higher than I would have anticipated. The purple slice there above the green one, 26.3%, is urine alcohol testing. Of course, is probably the least stable methods of alcohol testing, certainly compared to breath and saliva, and of course, blood being perhaps the gold standard if you're, on the science side of the drug and alcohol testing industry. But higher than I thought it would be. But then again, a lot of companies, maybe a lot of companies on today's webinar, will couple a drug test, a urine drug test, with a urine alcohol test all at the same time. Not an uncommon practice. The slices above that, 18% and 8.3%, are companies that indicated combining the sale of breath and saliva or breath and urine in a single package with a client. Most why companies perform alcohol tests, again, the giant blue slice there on the right of the pie, 60.8% random testing. Very narrow slice, 4%, I thought it'd be higher, reasonable suspicion, 14% post-accident. And this is important because this indicates to us, right, that a lot of companies are talking about DOT alcohol testing. The side of the DOT mandated market, you're not going to see a lot of random alcohol testing in the workplace because of ADA concerns. Some of this is probably a reflection of the survey participants providing their services to DOT-covered employees. Now, switch gears and talk about oral fluid testing. This was a really hot topic in the 2015 survey because back in May, the proposed guidelines for lab-based oral fluid testing came out from SAMHSA, and during the time we were doing this survey, the regulations were or the proposed guidelines, I should say, were subject to public comment. So there was a lot of interest in the whole issue of oral fluid drug testing, and it's reflected, I think, in the results that we saw. When asked, how it was doing in 2015 compared to 2014, 6% said that oral fluid sales were up considerably. and 26.7% said that they were up at least modestly. So if you combine those two categories together, 30.3% said that sales were up, and 15.4% said that sales were the same. Only 5.6% said that oral fluid testing sales were down slightly, and 0% said down significantly. So clear oral fluid testing, oral fluid drug testing is rise. The interest level is increasing from year to year, and of course, people were waiting for the federal government to do something. Those proposed guidelines came out. Now, it's important to note that the proposed guidelines only apply to lateral fluid testing, and at least initially, as far as the final guidelines are concerned, they will only apply to drug testing within the federal government. We're already starting to see an impact in the outside of the federal government in other areas, and I've done a number of webinar presentations this year on the proposed guidelines and on the comments that were submitted. And it's important to note that, well, they will only apply to drug testing of federal employees within the federal government. Eventually, the DOT and the NRC and maybe other government agencies that manage drug testing in the private sector would likely adopt the proposed guidelines when they become part of 49 CFR Part 40, and they will eventually, I think, become the gold standard for oral fluid drug testing. We're not there yet. I'll add, though, that SAMHSA projects that the final version of these guidelines will come out and be made public in sometime in the spring, looking at maybe an April time frame, maybe May. Everything turns out to be farther down the road than was projected, so don't hold me to that, but that's what they said at the last DTAB meeting, at least the one that I listened in on. Or again, how do sales in 2015 compare to 2014? 25.3% said they are seeing greater interest in oral fluid testing. 22.5% said not seeing much interest in oral fluid testing. So there's a balancing act right there. However, that went below there, now that SAMHSA has issued proposed guidelines, we anticipate increased interest in oral fluid testing, 3.8%, and 12.6% said we proactively offer oral fluid testing as an option. However, 5%, just below that, said they not actively promote oral fluid testing. Once the final guidelines come out, 14% said they will offer oral fluid testing when SAMHSA guidelines are finalized. So we see a lot of anticipation of these guidelines coming in and then eventually being finalized and being made public. The industry as a whole has started to, I think over the last 2 or 3 years, has started to become more interested, and you see more efforts to educate in the area, and it's going to be an important part of drug testing going forward. There's no question about it. In fact, in proposed guidelines that came out from SAMHSA's own words, that within 4 years of adoption by other federal agencies like DOT, et cetera, they put within 4 years, lab-based oral fluid testing will be 25 to 30% of all regulated drug tests. And that's significant in terms of increment on the sort of the traditional urine testing market share there. And that's just in the regulated industry or marketplace for drug testing. I think outside of that, you'll probably see a higher percentage eventually going to lab-based oral fluid testing, especially instead have legalized marijuana laws because of the shorter window of detection with oral fluid compared to urine and certainly hair testing, where employers are being challenged regularly as to whether they have the right to even test for marijuana. And let me just say right now, yes, you do. There is no marijuana law in this country, in any state, that prohibits an employer from drug testing or drug testing for marijuana. So even to see that there's a lot of competition in the industry and among our clients as we get to the end of today's presentation, the claims that drug testing for marijuana in the workplace is still legal and employers should still be doing it. And I can talk to that a little bit later. Okay, last slide on oral fluid testing. I I thought it was interesting, 77.7% of people said that they were aware of the SAMHSA proposed guidelines. Only 51% said they had read at least part of the guidelines. Only 2% said they submitted comments during the comment period. 30% said they had read the public comments once they came out. So, a lot of it, not very full sense, and not very many people read the public comments. I'm a people who did the proposed guidelines, did read through the comments. It was a lot of dense information. But we did a number of surveys, over the past several months on the proposed guidelines and on the comments. If you're interested in that, we can send a link to the presentations that we did, and you can listen to the recordings. But look a little bit. We have discussed the proposed guidelines with some of our clients, 23.6%, used as a marketing tool to broach subject with their clients. We have had clients inquire about the proposed guidelines, 16.6%, and we have had clients that have expressed interest in lab-based oral fluid testing as a result of the proposed guidelines, 13.8%. A lot of opportunity there within the drug testing industry. If you're a provider and you also do collections and you're worried about losing collection business, because with oral fluid testing, sometimes the employer can just take care of the collection themselves because it's so easy to do. I got to ask your second question, would I like to keep at least some of the business? I think in mind going for that, even though it's easier to do the collection, employers will still want to have a professional technician administer that test. Rapid results, instant result, or point of collection, point of care testing, as you can see, 60.3%, that big giant slice of the pie to the right, said part of their business is growing. Only 90%, red slice there, said that their POCT business is slowing. 3 of their sales, instant testing versus testing. The green slice at 7%. Still, most of the industry is a lab-based drug testing industry. We sell rapid result tests. That's 9.8%, the slice of the pie above the green one. Our POCT is urine, not oral fluid, 39.4%. The orange one, most of our POCT is oral fluid, not urine, and you'll notice that there is no orange slice because nobody mentioned that. Nobody that represented their position. But the dark blue slice at the top there, 4.2%, said they are planning to become more active in selling POCT drug tests. Testing, again, our clients typically prefer using FDA-cleared devices, 30%. Our clients are typically not concerned with FDA-cleared devices, 66%. And our clients tend to take our advice, and we always recommend FDA-cleared devices, 50%. Now, if you down a little bit, and one in the middle, that sort of darker blue slice, we tend to sell the least expensive device, regardless of FDA or non-FDA. Nobody was willing to admit that. Quality more important than the price when it comes to POCT, 36.6%. But look at that 63.3% there to the right at the bottom. We advise clients using rapid result instant testing to confirm on negative results with lab confirmation. That 63% should probably be higher than that. Synthetic testing, K2 Spice, bath salts, as you can see, 47% said it was a growing part of their business this year, 32.4% saying it was a slowing part of their business. However, I think in the second part of the year we saw a resurgence of interest in synthetic drugs and synthetic drug testing. Drug testing prices from lab pricing, as you can see, lab prices were up in 2015, 20.2% said that, where lab prices were the same, was mentioned by 54%. So the majority of people saying that their lab pricing did not go up in 2015. Some did. If you look at the green bar, though, lab prices were down. There were about 6.7% actually said that they saw a downward trend in lab prices. The purple bar represents POCT, or rapid testing. Rapid result device prices are up in 2015. Only 5.4% said that. Result device prices are down in 2015, and you can see that blank space there because nobody said that. Rapid result device prices are the same, up 8.1%. To collections, 59.4% said collection prices were up in 2015. 37% said prices for collections were the same in 2015. Collection prices were down in 2015. You can see there is no green bar, nothing there. So collection prices is definitely at least the same for the majority of people in our industry on the rise. Now let's switch our attention to the brand name recognition category. I've left myself a good 10 minutes here to go through this part. If you have any questions, let us know. Let me just say right at the beginning, I only put down what people say. If somebody says one brand and then they say another brand, but I know it's the same company, I mark it as different responses. I don't try to interpret what people said to be fair to everybody. But these are the categories that I'm going to take you through as we go through the various brand name recognition results. There are about 12 of them altogether. I'll go through quickly, and then we'll have one at the end that summarizes everything. The disclaimer that we don't try to enjoy what you said. But I'll say that our point system, that last bullet at the bottom, 5 points for a first mention, 3 for a second mention, 1 point for a third mention. This is similar to what we see when sports leagues tally the votes for MVP and things like that, where they weight a first place vote more heavily than a 10th place vote, or in this case, a third place vote. So 5 points for a first mention, 3 points for a second mention, and 1 point for a third mention. In the lab urine testing category, Quest with 151 total points had 24 number 1 first mentions, 15 number 2 or second mentions, and 1 number 3 third mention. So you add up the points, came out 151. Quest was the top point getter in any single category, and as you can see, they had a boatload of first place mentions. Blackboard typically has finished second to Quest over the years. Quest has always dominated this category. They had the most number of second mentions. And then you see Alere number 3, CRL number 4, MedTox number 5. CRL really crept up on LabCorp, but where we saw the most daylight eliminated was between number 3 Alere and number 4 CRL, where CRL really crept up and got very close to Alere this year in the battle for the number 3 spot. When it comes to lab-based oral fluid testing, Orer dominates this category every year. Here, however, they increased their lead over second place significantly. Total of 129 points, 19 number 1s, 11 number 2s, only 1 number 3. Quest at number 2 with 52 points, Quantasol at number 3 with 31 points, and Alere, which of course owns Quantasol. I could have combined the two for 44 points, but Alere sells a variety of oral fluid testing products, and so I don't want to try to interpret what somebody meant when they said Alere, so I separated them. But it does say something positive about the Alere brand name that they get mentioned in lots of different categories, Quest of course as well. But OraSure dominated the lab-based oral fluid testing category. For oral fluid POCT, or on-site testing, the instant testing devices, Oratec 31 points, followed very closely by the Alere brand at 27%. OraSure, which doesn't have a POCT on-site testing device, finished number 3 in a tie with iScreen at 21%. And QED, which is actually an instant alcohol testing device manufactured by OraSure, came in 5th at 15 points. Again, to eliminate those kinds of things, but I don't want to apply that type of interpretation, so I just put down what people say. But you see it was a pretty tight race there in the number 1 and number 2 categories, even though there's overlapping brand ownership in different places. POCT on-site, Alere 40, Cup 32, iScreen 16, eScreen, which is owned by Alere, 16, and Noble at 14. This is a category which Alere typically wins, add up all their various brand names and the private labeled names that are out there of Alere devices. The total points would be much higher. So you're only seeing the top 5 finishes here in terms of brand names. It showed you all the product names that got listed. It would be a fairly lengthy list. What I'm saying is a lot of those other brands that I show you would be a private label device from Alere typically. This is really interesting. Psychomedics has dominated this category year after year after year. Omega is always number 2. Quest has been number 3 the last few years, but look how tight the totals were. As we were tallying up the results here, I thought we may see a big upset in the making because Omega was leading at one point as we were tallying up the results. But Psychomedics finished with 109 points, Omega with 103, Quest with 100, all of them within less than 10 points of each other. You can see, though, that Psychomedics outdistanced the other two in number 1 mentions. The number 3 company, Quest, actually had more number 1 mentions than Omega, but Omega dominated the number 2 mentions category. So very, very close results there in the hair testing category. Collectors, usually this is won by Concentra. However, Quest came in first this year with a very, very healthy, actually it's been over the last couple of years now, with a very healthy lead. You'll see a battle for second and third place with Concentra, LabCorp, MSI, and then DISA. But Quest again dominating in this category with 16 number 1 mentions. Testing, LifeLock, number 1 at 62 points. Number 1 mentions at 11, followed by Intoximeter, QE, which is obviously an instant saliva dredger and intoxilizer. A lot of people would put a particular product name from Dredger or from LifeLock, but we like to, again, not interpret what people were saying. Even add all of that together, LifeLock still came in first, still had the number 1 votes, total of votes. Oral services, university services, number in this category again. Some people would put a doctor name, and Dr. Gerson, of course, is president of University Services, which of course now is owned by DISA, always gets a lot of mentions himself personally. He got 13 total points this year, but you can do University Services number 1, Nationwide Medical Review number 2, First Advantage, i3 Screen, and then Ben Gerson tied with National MRO to round out the top 5. Third-party administrators, this is a little bit difficult to measure because there are so many different TPAs, and TPAs do so many different things. First Advantage, number 1, DISA, number 2, 3937, much, much closer. You don't get as many people commenting in this category. That's why you see only, like for First Advantage, for example, only 13 total mentions. For DISA, what they amount to 11 total mentions. I shouldn't say, I said that wrong at the beginning. A lot of companies do participate. They do mention TPAs, and this is one of the longer lists because a lot of TPAs get mentioned. So the fact that First Advantage didn't get mentioned by more than 13 or DISA by more than 11 is not a concern because a lot of TPAs participate in the survey and they mention themselves, I guess. But pretty race there for number 1 and number 2. AWSI number 3 at 20, First Lab 18 at number 4, and then eScreen number 5 with 17 total points. Check providers, again, some of these are drug testing companies, of course, that do background. Some of them are background. These are mostly background screening companies that have become very active in drug testing, with the exception of DISA. But you got First Advantage number 1, HireRight number 2, Sterling number 3, ClearStar number 4, and then DISA creeping up there at the bottom, not usually registering in this category, but having this year mentioned by a couple of companies. Management software, you've got CIS, Compliance Information Services at 43, or Systems at 43 points, DrugPak at 38, i3 Screen at 26, Red Arrow, which is a CIS product, at 18, and then eScreen at 14. You'll see when we do the overall results that I did combine that for CIS when it comes to the overall points. Electronic chain of custody, FormFox really dominates in this category in the same way that Orchard does with oral fluid or Quest does for lab urine. FormFox with 131 total points, mentioned as the number 1 recognized brand name by 25, 27 total mentions. eScreen, Quest, CIS, which owns FormFox, of course, and LabCorp. This is the culmination or summary of all of them. Quest had 515 total points, with first place mentions, 53 second place mentions, and 6 third place mentions, followed by, and he did combine CIS, FormFox, Red Arrow into one category at 220 total points. If I broke them out, CIS would have been obviously lower on this list, but I think they would have still finished in the top 10. But LabCorp would have finished number 2 at 156 points, followed by Lear, Omega, Psychonetics, and First Advantage, all scoring over 100 points in the combination of different categories, then followed by eScreen, OraSure/QED, and i3 Screen. So Quest obviously dominates in a number of different categories, and they get a lot of mentions in a lot of different categories, and so they rack up the most points. You look at it overall, and these are pretty strong brand names, all of them. Some of them zero recognition in just one or two categories, like OraSure, for example, which dominates oral fluid testing and scores very well in alcohol testing. But then there's Quest or Lear, for example, which will be mentioned prominently in a variety of categories, and so they score higher that way. If I had added into Lear's total all the different private label brand names and stuff that really sort of pertain to them, or the Quantasol type of stuff, the other brands, the other companies that belong to Lear, their total would have been higher. I did just like this to try to be a little bit more fair overall. Let me just kind of breeze through these concerns because I see we're running low on time here. We're going to send these slides out to you, so you're going to have access to all of this information. And if you have any further questions, just let us know. And forgive any typos that you find in them. We apologize for that. Drug testing is a concern for some people. What I tried to do with the concerns, because there were so many of them brought up, I tried to pick comments that represented many concerns in the same category. So political trends and drug testing mentioned. I think it's long for guidance to come out, the slow pace of the government to respond to different issues, collection sites, drug cheating. I just did a webinar on that earlier this month, and the continued confusion regarding the legalization of marijuana, ECFs, expanded opiates, oral fluid testing, all proposed changes that are coming down the pipe. When are they going to come out? How are we going to educate the industry on these things? We're all sort of on the same page. There are still a lot of collection sites that do not go by the DOT regulations. Some people commenting that that's an unfair thing, that they go to the effort to follow the regulations, others don't, etc. Also, down to the third one, Congress will mandate SAMHSA-approved hair testing. We saw that come out in the transportation bill that was just by the President earlier this month, I think on December 4th. Which includes a hair testing provision and requires regulations to come out within a year. We'll see how that goes, but certainly hair testing makes strides there, even if they're sort of bypassing, I say they, that's not fair to put it that way, but even if hair testing sort of bypassing to some extent the process that oral fluid testing had to go through with DTaP, I think you'll see hair testing have to crack and check all those boxes off. And then finally, our bonus question, if you legalize marijuana, we asked questions a little bit differently this year than we did the year before, but some of the results still quite shocking. There are 32.8% of our survey respondents who said that the legalization of marijuana will have little or no negative impact on the industry. That's really, sticking our head in the sand. It's already having an impact, as only 4.1% said that, but look at these next two numbers. 9.1% there have been, the purple one to the right, 67.1% saying employees are confused, and that should be employers, that's a typo. Employers are confused and worried about how to deal with marijuana in the workplace, and 6.8% employers will start to eliminate marijuana from their drug testing panels, and 19.1%, that's a whopping figure, that orange bar in the middle of green, that 19.1% indicating that some employers have already eliminated marijuana from their drug test panel. If you look at the purple, the light blue, and the orange, that should be very concerning to anybody in the drug testing industry. Even though we continue to tell our clients that they have the right to test for marijuana, that they continue to test for marijuana, that there are ways to comply with these legalized marijuana laws and still keep your workplace safe by testing for marijuana, we're still seeing an unacceptable percentage of clients that are either considering dropping marijuana from their panel or have already dropped marijuana from their panel. And as I said on yesterday's webinar, if you were on that one, the problem is, of course, twofold. One, less safe workplaces if you're not testing for marijuana and doing something about it. But also, if you're in the drug testing business and your clients see their positivity rate from testing only for cocaine, opiates, amphetamines, etc., dropping to less than 0.5% total, you're going to have a bunch of clients a year or two down the road that are going to start asking you, why should I even do this? I'm not getting positives or very few positives anymore. And of course, the simple answer to that is you're not testing for marijuana, the #1 illicit drug of abuse. So you're probably seeing a commensurate increase in accidents, workers' comp claims, etc., opening your company to increased exposure to liability, while at the same time, claiming that you're not getting positives. That's the reason why. There could be, I think, a backlash when it comes to the whole marijuana issue down the road. For the time being, it's something that the industry has to wake up to, and DAISHA has become very active on the marijuana issue, rallying its members to become more aware of the issues, educating their members, etc., and trying to create more of an effort to be active in the communities where their members do business. And that's got to happen. The industry would have to do it, but we have to help them. We have to educate our clients that are employers and other types of companies or organizations that do drug testing, because there's an issue, unfortunately, that is not going to go away. In 2016, we're going to probably see a record number of states with marijuana legalization on the ballot in November, because it's going to be one of the tools that is used to try to get voters to the polls come November for the presidential election. And you're going to see a lot of marijuana ballots out there. You're going to see marijuana on the ballot in a lot of states. There were a lot of efforts underway. Now, as I shared in yesterday's webinar on new state drug testing laws, but I also talked about the ballot initiatives that are already in the works right now to get marijuana in the ballot in states like Nevada, Arizona, California, other places, to legalize it. I'm not talking about medical marijuana. It's already legal in those states, medical marijuana, but this is for recreational, or what the marijuana people are now calling adult use marijuana laws. And I see a record number of these issues in the states next year. We've got to be concerned about it as an industry, and we help our clients understand what their rights are and what their responsibilities are when it comes to continuing to test for marijuana. Again, I want to thank all of this year's industry survey sponsors. As you see their logos here on the screen, I'd also like to acknowledge DAISHA for sponsoring today's webinar and make it possible for us to bring this information to you. We're at the end of the presentation and our time. We had a lot of people on today's webinar. Thank you for coming on. If you have questions, if you'd like more information, we can help you with that. And with that, I will turn the virtual microphone back over to Jessica to give you some instructions on how you can access this information after today's webinar is finished.
Thank you. On behalf of DAISHA and the Current Consulting Group, we hope that you have found today's presentation informative and helpful. This presentation was recorded, and you will receive instructions informing you how to access the recording. Thank you for your attendance. This concludes today's webinar.